Hi guys. I'm going to recap a 2009 Korean psychological thriller movie titled Thirst. After participating in a shady experiment, a priest finds himself craving for flesh and blood. Will he be able to hold himself or succumb to this newfound desire? Let's find out. In a world torn by a mysterious disease called the Curse of Bazira, many people are suffering without the cure. In one of the hospitals, a priest named Song-hyun is offering help to those who suffer from the disease. However, Song-hyun can only provide them with spiritual support and can't do much to truly save them. Knowing that he is helpless against the disease that struck all those patients, Song-hyun asks for his mentor's help. When Song-hyun is assisting his blind mentor, Ro, he begs Ro to put him into the experiment for the cure. Hearing that, Ro doesn't approve Song-hyun's decision to volunteer as a test subject. However, Song-hyun decides to do it nonetheless despite his superior disapproval. Upon arriving at the laboratory, a scientist explains to Song-hyun the risk of this experiment. After agreeing to the term, Song-hyun is injected with the virus to see if he can develop antibodies for a cure. After a month, Song-hyun's body begins to show symptoms such as blisters on his skin. Some days later, Song-hyun's condition becomes worse as he begins to vomit blood. When Song-hyun is dying from the disease, the scientist performs a blood transfusion for him. Unfortunately, Song-hyun lost consciousness and is presumed dead by the scientists. After they cover Song-hyun's body with a piece of cloth, they are taken aback to hear Song-hyun comes back to life while reciting a Bible verse. 6 months after that, the news about Song-hyun coming back to life spread all over the world. Many people begin hailing him as a holy man with miracles that can cure all types of diseases. When Song-hyun is at the hospital, the doctor is astonished to see his ability to rapidly heal himself. However, Song-hyun states that he is now sensitive to smell and sound, which sometimes makes him feel dizzy. On the other side, Song-hyun's mentor also notices Song-hyun's recent popularity and the fact that people are calling him a saint. Even though Song-hyun thinks of that as untrue, many people are truly cured after he prays for them. One day, a woman named Ra begs Song-hyun to pray for her son who suffers from cancer. When Song-hyun arrives at the hospital room, he realizes that Ra's son is his childhood friend named Kang-woo. In addition, there is also a woman named Tae-ju who Song-hyun thought was Kang-woo's sister. However, Mrs. Ra tells Song-hyun that Tae-ju is a child that was abandoned by her parents at Ra's home. Moreover, Ra also tells Song-hyun that Tae-ju is now her daughter-in-law after Kang-woo takes her as his bride. Later at night, Mrs. Ra invites Song-hyun to dinner at her house. When Song-hyun is close to Tae-ju, his senses are disturbed by the smell of blood. Upon hearing Song-hyun's words, Tae-ju immediately moves away because she is on her period. Shortly after, Kang-woo returns home with a bunch of friends. Kang-woo then introduces Young-do and Evelyn to Song-hyun. After that, an ex-police chief named Sung-dae also joins them tonight for a game of mahjong. While at Ra's house, Song-hyun notices how Tae-ju is treated more like a servant than a family member. However, Song-hyun also expresses his desire when he accidentally sees Tae-ju's skin. Later that night, Kang-woo messes with Tae-ju and causes her to drop on the floor. Even after such humiliation, Tae-ju tries her best to hold back from hitting her husband. After that, Tae-ju goes outside and runs barefoot on the street. When Song-hyun returns to his room, he punishes himself for seeing Tae-ju earlier. As Song-hyun becomes even more sensitive to smells and sounds, he becomes disturbed and loses focus. Eventually, the sudden burst of noises and smells causes Song-hyun to fall to the floor. Meanwhile, in Kang-woo's room, Tae-ju spends the night thinking of ending her husband's life. The following morning, Song-hyun finds his body covered with blisters. Because of this, he bandaged himself to prevent people from seeing his wound. When Song-hyun is giving the last rite to a dying patient, he can't hold himself from tasting the patient's blood. As a result, Song-hyun returns to the hospital at night and sneaks into a hospital room. Inside the room, Song-hyun satisfies his desire for blood by drinking from the tube of a comatose patient. After consuming that blood, Song-hyun's blisters are now healing rapidly. Driven by guilt and the fear of becoming a sinner, Song-hyun rushes to a nearby window and jumps out. However, Song-hyun survives the fall without suffering any injury. Meanwhile, Tae-ju leaves her house and goes on her barefoot night run routine. Shortly after, Tae-ju accidentally runs into Song-hyun and feels embarrassed. When Tae-ju is about to run away, Song-hyun grabs her and gives his shoes to Tae-ju. At that moment, Song-hyun feels a sudden desire to drink from Tae-ju's veins. Luckily, he manages to hold his urge and leaves Tae-ju alone. The following night, Song-hyun tells his blind mentor about his vampiric situation. To convince Ro, Song-hyun lets Ro's hand hold his beating heart. When Song-hyun expresses his frustration, Ro offers Song-hyun to consume his blood instead. Ro tells Song-hyun that this isn't his fault. Ro also expresses his willingness to help Song-hyun as long as no innocents are hurt. After hearing Ro's offer, Song-hyun agrees to consume his mentor's blood regularly. After that, Song-hyun goes to Kang-woo's house for their mahjong game. But then, Song-hyun returns at midnight before Tae-ju goes out for her running routine. When Tae-ju is about to return Song-hyun's shoes, they get surprisingly close to each other. In the heat of the moment, they give up on their primordial instinct and perform a steamy interaction. Amidst their match, Tae-ju expresses her frustration in living with Kang-woo's family. She also tells Song-hyun how she always wished for him to take her away when they were a child. Unfortunately, their steamy moment is interrupted by Ra. Upon hearing Ra's calling, Tae-ju leaves Song-hyun on the floor and ends their night prematurely. The following night, Song-hyun confesses his sins to Father Ro. Upon hearing that, Ro warns his disciple to hold himself from sinning even further. However, Ro's warning doesn't affect Song-hyun at all as he secretly meets with Tae-ju at the hospital. After taking Tae-ju to the room of a comatose patient. Before clapping their cheeks, Song-hyun tells Tae-ju that they both will go to hell if they continue. Hearing that, Tae-ju tells Song-hyun that she has no faith, therefore she wouldn't go to hell. Afterwards, they get down to business and indulge in pleasure. After that, Song-hyun intends to inform Tae-ju about his vampiric power. He then demonstrates his power by drinking the comatose patient's blood. Unfortunately, Song-hyun's action causes Tae-ju to run away in shock. When Tae-ju arrives home, Song-hyun stalks her from the bathroom window. Song-hyun then breaks into the room and convinces Tae-ju that he is harmless. When Song-hyun is about to take Tae-ju away, he accidentally knocks down a toilet lid. The sound alarms Kang-woo's family and foils Song-hyun's plan. When Song-hyun rushes to escape, Tae-ju witnesses his inhuman strength. The next night, Song-hyun and Tae-ju meet at an abandoned building. As Tae-ju expresses her curiosity, Song-hyun decides to show her his ability. When Song-hyun is holding Tae-ju in his hand, he notices a wound mark on the woman's body. When Song-hyun asks about it, Tae-ju admits that Kang-woo had abused her sometimes. Hearing that, Song-hyun feels enraged and swears to punish Kang-woo's family. When Tae-ju returns home, Kang-woo sees her wounds and expresses his concern. However, Tae-ju doesn't utter a word and only stares at Kang-woo sinisterly. Meanwhile, Ro expresses his concern regarding Song-hyun's uncontrollable desire. Ro advises Song-hyun to get the cure from the lab that experimented on him. However, Song-hyun can't do that as he will be exposed to sunlight if he goes there. Suddenly, Father Ro expresses his desire to be able to see and think that vampirism can cure him. Hearing that, Song-hyun is shocked that his mentor is tempted by earthly desire. As Ro desperately begs for Song-hyun to share his blood, Song-hyun denounces his faith and leaves the monastery. Afterwards, Song-hyun goes to Ra's house and asks if he can stay there. As Ra is grateful for Song-hyun's prayer that cured her son, she decides to let Song-hyun stay with them. Since Song-hyun is now living with Kang-woo's family, it is easier for him and Tae-ju to spend their time. When they are talking about their escape plan, Kang-woo notices that his wife isn't on the bed. As a result, Kang-woo decides to go outside to find Tae-ju, but he still can't find her. The following day, Ra learns from Kang-woo that his wife has been missing at night. Therefore, Mrs. Ra decides to put a lock on Kang-woo's room. At midnight, Tae-ju struggles to open the door because Ra has locked it from outside. Meanwhile, Song-hyun, who lives in the basement, has put a wardrobe as his sleeping coffin. The situation becomes much worse as Tae-ju's freedom is taken away from her. When Kang-woo is asleep, Tae-ju hurts herself on the same spot that Song-hyun noticed the other day. After smelling Tae-ju's blood, Song-hyun rushes out to her. Seeing this, Song-hyun becomes enraged and intends to end Kang-woo's life. However, Tae-ju stops him from ending Kang-woo without a plan. The next night, Song-hyun, Tae-ju, and Kang-woo are going on a fishing trip. When they arrive at a remote lake, they board a small boat and go to the middle of the lake. The unsuspecting Kang-woo is then shocked when Song-hyun and Tae-ju reveal their motives and sinister plan for him. Afterwards, Song-hyun drags Kang-woo into the water. After struggling for his life, Kang-woo finally meets his demise and drowns. When Song-hyun returns to the surface, he bites Tae-ju's neck and drinks her blood. After realizing that they can be together now, they get too excited and accidentally flip the boat. When the authorities arrive, they take Tae-ju to the hospital, while the others are trying to find Kang-woo. After that, Song-hyun is taken to the police station for questioning. When Song-hyun is finished with the police, he immediately goes to see his former mentor. Song-hyun explains that he had placed a rock onto Kang-woo to keep him from floating back. However, all those confessions don't matter to Ro as he still desires Song-hyun's vampiric blood. Before offering his blood to Ro, Song-hyun asks his former mentor to grant him absolution. However, Song-hyun's wound becomes worse after being given absolution. Before Ro consumes the vampiric blood, Song-hyun stops him and ends Ro's life. Song-hyun then drinks Father Ro's blood to cure himself. Afterwards, Song-hyun escapes and throws Ro's body into the sea. As time passes, Song-hyun continues living as a vampire and forms a deeper bond with Tae-ju. While on the other side, Kang-woo's death has taken its toll on Ra's health. Eventually, Ra suffers from a stroke and becomes paralyzed. With nobody to disturb them now, Tae-ju begins to invite Song-hyun to her bed. However, the guilt of ending Kang-woo's life also manifested in their mind. Now that Tae-ju will inherit Ra's properties, Tae-ju spends her time taking care of the paralyzed Ra. While taking Ra to a park, Tae-ju receives a call from the police for a lie detector test. This makes Tae-ju feel uncomfortable and afraid that the police will learn the truth. When Tae-ju is invited to Young-do's house, she has no idea what the man is planning. Since his wife is now away, Young-do takes advantage of Tae-ju and forces himself on her. Unfortunately, Tae-ju's condition is too vulnerable and she is defenseless to Young-do's immoral act. After escaping from Young-do, Tae-ju rushes home. On the road, Tae-ju meets Song-hyun, who is looking for her. Upon smelling Young-do's scent on Tae-ju's body, Song-hyun immediately confirms his fear. However, they put this matter on hold since today is Ra's birthday. After presenting a birthday cake to the paralyzed Ra, Tae-ju remembers that her adoptive mother had never celebrated Tae-ju's birthday party. Because of that, Tae-ju suddenly slaps Ra's face in front of Song-hyun. Seeing how Tae-ju disrespect Ra, Song-hyun slaps her in return. Afterwards, Tae-ju hugs Song-hyun and they act as lovers in front of Ra. Suddenly, Tae-ju's tongue slips as she reveals that Kang-woo had never hurt her. Upon hearing that, Song-hyun questions Tae-ju about the truth. Tae-ju then admits that she lied about Kang-woo abusing her. The truth shocks Song-hyun as he only agrees to end Kang-woo because he thought that Tae-ju is abused by her husband. As they argue over their crime, Tae-ju rushes to Ra and blames Song-hyun for ending Kang-woo. The situation soon becomes tense as they blame each other for their misfortune. Eventually, Song-hyun throws Tae-ju onto the wall. The poor Ra also suffer from this as they fight over the woman. When Tae-ju begs to be reunited with her husband, Song-hyun ends her life immediately and drinks her blood. However, Song-hyun then regrets taking his lover's life, so he turns Tae-ju into a vampire. From then on, they both live as a vampire which only comes out at night. While making dinner for Ra, Tae-ju accidentally spills her blood into the meal. After feeding the meal to Ra, Tae-ju notices that Ra is able to move her finger now. When the vampire couple is being questioned with a lie detector, they manage to avoid suspicion and free themselves. When they leave the police station, Song-hyun tells Tae-ju to go home separately to avoid suspicion. Afterwards, Tae-ju acts independently without Song-hyun's approval. She then lures a detective to a remote area and ends his life. Unlike Song-hyun, Tae-ju embraces her hunting instinct and prefers to drink from her prey. When Tae-ju returns to meet her lover, Song-hyun notices that she has been consuming blood. As they argue over their feeding method, Song-hyun tries to warn Tae-ju about what she becomes. As a result, Song-hyun catches Tae-ju before she escapes. Afterwards, Tae-ju's condition becomes worse as she refuses to drink the blood that Song-hyun gives her. When Song-hyun gets a doctor for Tae-ju, she suddenly attacks the doctor and consumes him. Because of that, Song-hyun leaves the room and is confused about what to do now. Suddenly, their mahjong gang arrives at the wrong time. Because of that, Song-hyun and Tae-ju are forced to pretend to be normal and welcome their guests. Amidst their mahjong game, Mrs. Ra is able to move her finger and point at lettered mahjong pieces. As the guests follow Mrs. Ra's clue, they learn the truth about Kang-woo's death. Because of this, the vampire couple has no choice but to end their guest's life. With cold blood, Tae-ju ends them all while Song-hyun watches the event unfold. After that, Tae-ju mocks Song-hyun for his unwillingness to participate in the carnage. Tae-ju then drinks the blood of her victims as Song-hyun teaches her how to get the blood out. When Tae-ju leaves the room, Evelyn suddenly charges at her with a knife. Tae-ju then mocks her and decides to leave Evelyn for her last meal. When Tae-ju goes to end Evelyn, she finds that Song-hyun is currently drinking Evelyn's blood. Upon seeing that, Tae-ju is pleased to see Song-hyun succumbing to his vampiric desire. Afterwards, Song-hyun takes Mrs. Ra and Tae-ju away from their house before the police arrive and finds out what they did. When Evelyn wakes up, it turns out that Song-hyun had never hurt her. Song-hyun pretends to drink Evelyn in order to save her from Tae-ju. As Tae-ju is asleep in the car, she wakes up at dawn and realizes that Song-hyun had driven them to an open field. Tae-ju tries to escape with the car, but Sang-hyun has broken its key. In desperation, Tae-ju tries all methods to hide from the upcoming sunrise. However, Song-hyun prevents her from hiding and forces Tae-ju to give up. In the end, the two accept their fate as sunlight burns the two of them. Simultaneously, Mrs. Ra watches the end of the two vampires that had ended her son's life. What do you think of this movie? Write your comments below. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like and comment to help the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.